All right, welcome to the inaugural episode of The Exchange MKE. My name is Joe Irado. I have my co-host with me,
Andy Brem.
And Andy, who do we have with us? I'll let you do the initial introduction because you have a history.
Yes, absolutely. We have Judge Jeff Conen here with us today.
Thank you very much. And you want to give us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I was a practicing lawyer for 12 years and was also the municipal judge in the City of Glendale. Decided to run for circuit court and ended up running against a 13-year incumbent who happened to have gotten arrested for beating his wife. So that made the election a little easier.
I don't want to laugh at that, but yeah, that's it makes it really easy to win in that one.
Oh,
Not that you wouldn't have won anyway, right?
That's true, but it was all good, and so I was relatively young back then, and young and gung ho, and worked out quite well. So,
what year was that, Judge?
1997.
Okay.
So I'll give a little bit of the premise for the show. So the whole idea of this is we'll run into people in the swinging door that we might find interesting, that we maybe don't know. And I happen to run into the judge completely organically right after recording another podcast. And it turns out that Andy had a history. So, Andy, what's your history with Judge?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a lawyer as well. And after graduating law school, I clerked, which is working for a judge here in Milwaukee County with Rebecca Dowd, who's now on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And Judge Conen here was in the civil, the bench, the civil rotation at the time. So we met a couple of times. I don't recall if we ever had the opportunity to work together, but developed a relationship from there.
How quickly you forget that I actually hired you.
He did hire me. Yes.
I was just going to ask because I'm going to start working with him. I want some inside info here.
I didn't know if you would want to say that on record, Judge. It could come back to haunt you, that decision.
No, that was the good old days when I was on the law clerk hiring committee, so we got to abuse a bunch of new lawyers, and whoever came out on top got the job.
Yeah,
so.
It was a very intimidating experience. I remember showing up to the courthouse, and it was you and Judge Hansher, and I don't remember who was all on the committee, but it had to be 5 or 6 judges that you're popping in for a half-hour interview, maybe an hour interview, and as a law student, that's a nerve-wracking experience.
Yeah, well, we had a sense of humor back then, too. So we'd start, talking about all kinds of stuff that really didn't have anything to do with the law, and then everyone kind of relaxed a little bit, with the exception of a few, and we never hired them, so because they didn't have a sense of humor.
You got to have a little bit of humility as a lawyer, don't you?
You should.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, actually, one of your cohorts, who will remain nameless, showed up in my court after he left from being a law clerk, and he appeared with a couple of his partners, and he walked in, and everyone was wearing suits and ties, and he was wearing a golf shirt.
Oh,
and
no.
I said, blank, where's your tie? And he started laughing, goes, oh, Judge, you're funny. And I go, oh, no, I am really serious. So, I thought that made my point there.
So Judge Conen's very clearly a nice guy. He's volunteered to be on this podcast with us, but you do not want to be on the wrong side of him in a courtroom, I can tell you that. So I'm now curious who that was and how they made that mistake.
Well, we'll talk after.
Okay, all right.
We don't want to put that out to everybody, but I don't have a lot of patience for people not being prepared. So, and being prepared, as Andy knows, is really not all that difficult. You have to know who your client is and what the case is about, and oddly enough, there are a lot of lawyers who don't even know that.
So just put in a little bit of effort.
The bare minimum.
Check the boxes.
Know your client and what the case is about.
I would assume those are the minimum boxes.
And it is kind of funny. Now, I mean, and in civil especially, there are a lot of really good lawyers who are extremely well prepared. But from time to time in criminal court, I mean, that's what you got. You got somebody who would walk in and call their client by somebody else's name and start talking about some other charge. And I'm like, I think you got the wrong client.
Is the client there at the time?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's even worse.
That doesn't go over well, I would imagine.
So that's actually kind of a great segue. So do you have maybe a shorter story that sticks out to you, kind of like that is this one of your favorite ones to tell or at least reminisce upon?
Well, it all depends on the language I can use.
Free game.
Yeah, free game, whatever you're comfortable with, and then we'll determine what age group we want to target. We can bleep if necessary.
So I had a case where there was a gentleman who had abducted and raped a woman, and I sentenced him to a long time in prison. When he got to the prison system, they do a DNA test, and there was a cold hit, meaning that they found that his DNA was involved in another abduction rape.
Oh, wow.
So they brought it back to court. And if it were charged all together, then it all would have kind of got lumped together and would have taken it all into account at the same time, but they never did that. So there was a lawyer involved in the case, the second case, and for some reason he was way too busy doing a misdemeanor, so he couldn't come over, so I had him removed, and the public defender's office appointed another lawyer who will remain nameless. So the guy ends up pleading out for a recommendation of a couple extra years because that would have been taken into account. So the DA does their deal and talks about the case. The defense lawyer then starts talking, and he says, Judge, compared to the other case that he was convicted of, this is a walk in the park. And I go, what? Everyone in the courtroom put their head down because they knew.
So it was another abduction and rape.
Right.
And they're saying this one was better than the prior. God.
And it actually preceded the one that he was originally charged.
So it was the most
convicted
recent
of.
one.
No, it was the.
Oh, it was before that.
Way
Okay.
before it. So
You guys are much smarter than me. I'm the dumb guy in the room, so you're going to have to just slow it down for me.
all good. So anyways, so he says, I said, excuse me? And he said, well, this one involves a prostitute, and she put herself in the zone of danger. And I go, excuse me? Now everyone is burying their head in their hands, and they know what's going to happen. The defendant stands up, looks at his lawyer, says, shut the fuck up. You're fired. Get out of here.
On the spot, huh?
So the guy who did those horrible things and has the worst judgment knew better to not use those terms.
Right.
I'm assuming zone of danger is not a legal term for when you're being raped.
Yeah, that doesn't get you out of a rape charge, I don't think.
Jeez.
So this guy was like, shut up. And I'm like, okay, you've been fired, so we have to get him a new lawyer. So before he leaves, I said to him, Mr. So-and-so, I'm a little hard of hearing, which I wasn't. So I didn't hear what your lawyer said, so I have no idea what he said. So we're going to start fresh after this.
The lawyer was not speaking
that's
for him.
very fair. I'm not rooting for that guy, but holy crap.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it was. And yeah. Anyway, so.
Well, I now have a new career goal to never be fired in open court. That's pretty bad.
Oh, and it was loud. It wasn't just, like pull the guy over and say you're fired. It was like stood up and announced it to the entire courtroom.
It's a bad day for that public defender.
Yeah. So, luckily for everyone, he's not practicing criminal law anymore.
That's good. Yeah, if I ever need a lawyer, I'm going to like send names to you guys and be like, hey, so what's the deal here?
Oh, yeah. Definitely should be done.
Yep. So, Jeff, you're from Milwaukee originally, right?
I am.
You're a
Born and
native.
raised.
All right.
Yep. Went to school at Nicolet and went to undergrad at Madison, went to law school in Chicago at Chicago Kent. And at the time I went to law school, all of the judges down there, well, not all, but a large number of them were going to prison for taking bribes during the Grey Lord investigations of the mid-'80s. So I'm like, I think I'll go back to good old Milwaukee where I don't have to pay the judges to listen to my case.
Jeez.
So I came back here and had some connections with the law. My stepfather was a lawyer and my uncle was a lawyer way back in the day. So I did have a lot of connections with the legal system here.
Excellent. So you came back to Milwaukee because you don't want to get involved in the Chicago corruption.
Well, that was part of it.
So is it still that way?
No, it's gotten better. I think there's still some craziness down there, but it's gotten a lot better. I know that, I lived up on the north side in Chicago when I was going to school, so we would take the L, and I'd get on the L every morning, open up the Chicago Tribune, because back in those days you had a morning trib and an evening trib, and so we'd be sitting on there, buddies that lived in the general area, and we'd be digging through the paper to see who got indicted that day.
So it was a regular occurrence. It was like, all right, who's on the docket today?
Oh yeah, it was a big deal back in those days. So they definitely a lot of them went to prison. And
was that like a federal investigation of the judges?
Yeah, it was a big federal investigation that was run by Dan Webb, who was the U.S. attorney at that time.
Okay. It's got to be a crazy time to be in law school in Chicago.
Oh, yeah. And before that, it was even worse because there was just a lot of corruption that was going on. People were always delivering envelopes places. So, not me, but. So, anyway, so then I got out of school. I worked as a law clerk for about a year for 4 trial judges and bounced my way through a handful of law firms doing insurance defense work and some collection work, and decided to go out on my own to get trial experience. And so I did civil work, did bankruptcies, personal injury, and some criminal defense work, and got my trial experience doing that. And then ran for the bench.
How long were you on the bench for, Judge?
24 years.
Wow, okay. And you just recently retired from that position, correct?
In 2020.
Okay, so 4 years. Yeah.
4 years ago.
So you're kind of a Milwaukee expert then, right?
Yeah, I know where all the bodies are buried.
Where are all the bodies buried?
Yeah, well, not all of them, just some of them.
Yeah.
So what would be the most interesting case you sat on the bench for in Milwaukee?
Oh, there are a lot of interesting ones.
Or maybe you have to tell a couple.
I got lucky to get, and I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek, to get round 2 of the Laurencia Bembenek case. Laurencia Bembenek, for those who don't know, and if you're from Milwaukee, most people know, was an ex-cop who allegedly killed her husband's ex-wife. He was a cop too, and there was a lot of issues going on about her being framed. She was eventually convicted. She then broke out of prison, went to Canada, was brought back here, pled out to a lesser charge, was given time served, and then back in the early 2000s, she filed a motion for a DNA review to see whether she could overturn her conviction. So I got lucky enough to have that case. So,
and what part of this this appeal or the motion did you get involved in?
So I got involved in the second part where they wanted the DNA to be tested, and at that point, the DA's office didn't object, so I got assigned to the case, and then they had the DNA testing, and it was kind of wild after that.
And so for people who don't know, this is like after the jury trials happen, so you're looking at the DNA testing and effectively making a decision whether there should be a new trial. Is that accurate?
Correct. And the the original trial was in 1982, so it was a long time ago. I was still in college back then. So.
Yeah, wow. And what was the ultimate result of this?
Inconclusive. However, it got weird before then. So
We like weird.
Well, yeah, this is really kind of weird. So back then, she had run out of money for the DNA testing and for her lawyer, so she called and got in touch with Dr. Phil.
No way.
And
got in touch like they were communicating?
Yes, and Dr. Phil was interested, so they offered to pay her legal bills if she would agree to an exclusive interview and opening the DNA results on national TV.
Okay.
Dr. Phil's a genius.
Yes.
There was a problem with that because no one asked me. So I get a call one day while the case was going on, and I'd heard a little bit about this from her lawyer, and it's one of Dr. Phil's producers, and Dr. Phil's producer says, well, we'd like to seal the DNA results and fly you out to California and then open the envelope on national TV.
Like with you there?
Right.
Okay.
And that would be the court proceedings.
You can make a ruling from Hollywood.
And I'm like, no. That's not what. No, come on, Judge. Come on. This is important. Absolutely not. There is no way I'm making a mockery out of this. So now Dr. Phil has to figure out what he's going to do because he wants this exclusive. So they pay for her to go out to Hollywood, and they put her up in a motel on the second floor, and they lock her in the motel so she can't go out and hear anything that goes on. Well, she goes stir crazy after maybe about 2 or 3 weeks and ties a bunch of bed sheets together and tries to escape out the window. And as she's climbing out the window, the bed sheets, because she didn't tie them tight enough, came apart and she fell out the second-story window, fell on her leg, broke her leg, and then had to have her foot amputated.
Unbelievable. Wow.
And then the DNA came back and it was inconclusive.
So it's all for naught. Yeah. Oh my God.
I mean, part of the problem is back in the early 80s, DNA was not very well developed. And,
Sure.
I was listening to hours of testimony from DNA experts. And what the cops would do is they would feel around with their hands on the sheets or whatever to find areas to test. Well, obviously now you're transferring DNA.
Oh, like no gloves,
No
just
gloves,
just
no nothing.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of problems with all of this. I have no idea whether she's guilty or she's not guilty. I know a jury found her guilty, but as far as the proof was concerned, there really was nothing to reopen the case.
And she just lost a foot on top of all that. Jeez.
And I don't mean to be cruel, but I don't think she had a leg to stand on.
That's great.
Solid
I don't
comment.
know how to follow that
You
up.
can't follow that. That's solid.
Yeah. Anyway.
So I'm Judge. I'm not from Milwaukee originally, and just vaguely familiar with this case. But what were the rumors? What was the news about her being framed? Like, were there theories? Was it just kind of scuttlebutt around town?
No, there were theories. There was some investigators that were out looking into this. There were a number of people who had connections to her ex-husband. And the whole deal was that her ex-husband wanted, the ex-husband or her husband wanted the ex-wife dead.
Oh, sure.
For purposes of child support and things like that. So
Sure.
but there were a number of people who were kind of brought up through this, the names. And I think one guy Fred Hornberger on his deathbed supposedly confessed, but no one ever really realized whether it was the truth or not. So it's still an ongoing thing. There was at least one movie, if not two movies, made about this, and called Run Bambi Run.
I don't think I've heard of that. Have you seen that?
No, I've never seen that.
It's required watching
well,
for
now
all the
you're going
listeners.
to have to go watch it.
Yeah, Run Bambi Run.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Put that in the
list.
show notes. That has to be pretty wild to be a part of, when these cases take off, and every once in a while there's a massive criminal case, and it's really, Milwaukee's a small city, right?
Right.
It's a big deal, and it dominates the news.
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, this all happened. The original case was in 1982, 1983. So I had just graduated from college, and so I was going to law school, so it was a big deal back then. And then throughout my legal career, it kept coming up and coming up again. And, then she escaped from prison, and there was the whole deal that came about with that. So throughout my career, it was stuff that kept coming up.
Sure.
And it was kind of interesting because I had been on the bench maybe about 3 to 4 years, and now I get assigned, in my early 40s, I get assigned to handle a case, that I grew up with. So it was kind of interesting.
That is interesting. That's wild. And I love how Dr. Phil is this isn't stained on his record some way. I hope I meet him someday and be like, hey, what about that lady you locked in a hotel room?
and
broke her leg and had to get amputated.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't heard that about Dr. Phil.
No.
He covered that up pretty well.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting. It was a very weird set of circumstances and a weird experience.
So how come more judges and lawyers don't write coffee table books of just short stories like this? Because I've heard two from you. I've met you twice. This is the second time. I met you in Swinging Door offhand, kind of told you the concept of the show, and you're like, I would do that. And then too bad for you. Oh yeah, you're going to have to get used to feeling like you're a zoo animal when you're in here. But that's just wild. I feel like you should write a book of just short stories. You could do volumes.
So, and Andy knows Judge Hancher. So Judge Hancher is a very close friend of mine. He's just turned in 81. And so he's had a lot of different, a lot of different experiences over the years, and even as a lawyer, and has a lot of great stories. And maybe you'll have him on at some point too, because he can tell a lot of the stories. So, yeah. So
that'd be great.
He wanted to write a book called Circus Court.
That sounds accurate.
Yeah.
And I'd really like to. I mean, I've got stories, but he's got stories that go way back to the late '60s. And there's stuff that you just sit and wouldn't believe. You just shake your head. So.
The only reason I can imagine is my brother-in-law's a criminal defense attorney. I won't say his name just because I don't know if he wants me to. But he'll tell me some we'll just be over at his house, and he'll walk in the door and he'll be flustered, what'd you do today? And he's like, well, let me tell you. And I'll be like, that was Wednesday, and you've been doing this for years. Holy crap!
And in town.
Yes. Yeah, in Milwaukee. You'd know him.
And he probably did not get yelled at by me.
I don't think so.
That's a good spot to be in.
Yeah.
So any other interesting or crazy stories that come to mind? Whether or not they're cases, but just anything.
Every day was a crazy day on the bench, especially in criminal court. Every day was something new and exciting, and maybe not so exciting and just weird. So we had all kinds of stuff. I know that we had when I was the municipal judge in Glendale back in the early '90s. I got a kind of dumb criminal story that's actually pretty funny. So we used to pick people up on warrants, so if they didn't show up for their tickets or they defaulted on the tickets and money was still due and owing, we'd pick them up on warrants. And so they would call me as long as it wasn't too late at night, and I'd come over and we'd do court right then and there in the jail.
On the spot? Wow.
On the spot. And it was, it's cash register justice. So how much money do you have in your pocket? Oh, I got $100. Great. The fine will be $56, give you a few extra bucks to get out of here.
Some walking around money.
We're going to get out of there. So they bring this guy in one night, and he and his girlfriend had their house raided by the drug cops, and they ripped the apartment or house apart and couldn't find anything. So they arrest him on this ticket warrant and bring him into Glendale. So when we did what we called special session, when we did this like cash register justice thing, we were sitting at a table just like you and I are, and there was a phone there. And, I did whatever I was supposed to do, and then I kind of walked out and just talking to the cops. And the guy supposedly said to one of the cops, can I use the phone? And the cop said, sure, not a problem. Calls his girlfriend. And he says to the girlfriend in front of the cop, did they find anything? And she says, no, they didn't. And he goes, good. Why don't you go? It's hidden under the floorboards in the living room, under this and that. Go and get it and take it out of there. So the cop who was sitting in there just kind of kept a straight face, didn't do anything, goes and calls the MPD cops that had served the warrant and said, go back there. This is where the drugs are.
Did he think because it was over, like, oh, they can't come back in?
Yeah. Right.
Like, oh, the warrant's now void.
Now the warrant's void, or it's over, and they didn't find anything the first time, and this is Glendale, and they don't care. And
that's called double jeopardy, isn't it?
Okay, so I was going to say that, but I don't want to be stupid. I know that's not double jeopardy, but I was going to do it as a joke.
It's not double jeopardy. But, yeah, so we've had all kinds of stupid criminal stories. Oh, I had another good one now that you're mentioning it. When I was on the bench, there was a guy who was kind of down on his luck, and he had lost his job and was pretty desperate for money. And so he robbed the U.S. Bank over on North Avenue and then left. And as he's walking out the door, he's trying to get away. And all of a sudden he hears all these sirens, and he starts freaking out. So he goes back to the bank, and he starts pulling on the door, and the doors are now locked because they're waiting for the cops to come. And he starts pounding on the door, and they said, go away, we've just been robbed. And he goes, I know I robbed you. I want to give you the money back. I feel bad.
All right, so in that type of scenario, it's a guy who's desperate on his luck, probably wouldn't normally do it. Obviously, you can't let him go because he broke the law. Is there any type of leniency that you as a judge would give them within reason?
This is the only time for like a bank robbery case that I gave somebody probation.
Really?
Because, I mean, seriously.
He tried returning it.
Number one, he tried returning it. Number two, it wasn't like he was running away. He kind of waited there for the cops.
Yeah.
Right.
So, this is somebody who had a rough time. And, not that I'm saying that people should do that if you're having
Absolutely
a rough
not.
time. But on the other hand, this is one of those weird situations where somebody deserved to have a pretty good break.
Well, that's nice of you. Yeah, it sounds like everybody cracks at some point. At least he did it in a way that wasn't too terrible.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm sure that I don't even think he had a gun. I think it was like a note. So, it's kind of like the old Woody Allen movie where, give me your money, I have a gum.
Right.
And they're like, oh, you said gum. You have gum? No, I meant gun. Well, it says gum right there.
Case of bad handwriting.
yeah.
So I've had a number of cases where you've had armed robberies with notes, and so it's still an armed robbery if there's a threat of harm.
Okay.
So if there's, a note, and there's been a handful of them that we kind of chuckled about because the note wasn't very well written.
How lengthy are these notes? I mean, what are they getting into here?
It's usually a sentence or two.
Yeah.
Give me the money, no funny stuff, stuff like that.
Sure.
But half the time it's not spelled right. And,
They watched a Dillinger movie.
Yes.
Or the guy who I had heard in Glendale also, who robbed one of the banks up there and wrote the robbery note on the back of his deposit slip.
It's a good way to get caught.
with his name and his address.
This is your handwriting, your address, your name. It wasn't me, I swear.
Busted.
It's so So there's a lot of stupid criminal stories. I have a lot of friends who are cops, and back in the day when we used to sit around and joke, they'd say, if it weren't for stupid criminals, we would never arrest anyone.
So that's actually kind of a good segue. Has there ever been an elusive case that you've been a part of or made aware of where things were happening where this person either got away or just never got caught?
Well, I mean, not really, except for I did have one interesting situation. I had a gentleman who was charged with sexual assault of a child under the age of 10, which was a mandatory minimum, 25 years in prison. And the bail on the case, I don't know, was $50,000, $60,000, and somebody posted the bail form. And day of trial comes around, and he doesn't show up. Every other court date, he used to be there on time with family members. He used to come in. He was very polite. Day of trial, doesn't show up. So we closed down the court for a little while. I send my bailiffs out to go look for him. They go to his house, look in the window, and the house is empty. They go next door to the neighbors and say, well, what happened to your neighbors? What happened? Where did they go? And they said, well, the moving trucks were here yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So cost of freedom was $60,000, I guess, and he bolted. God knows where he went. And
Never found him.
Yeah.
if they did, I don't know about it, but at least while I was on that rotation, they never found him. And
really?
Wow.
I'm sure there was a warrant out, and someday he'll get picked up somewhere. But yeah, he took off.
He's in Cancun.
Probably.
Yeah.
Somewhere without extradition.
Yeah. That's so. Do you have any knowledge of who put up the money for his bail?
I'm assuming it was family members.
Sure.
Once the bail's posted, it's like whatever. I mean, you got somebody stupid enough to put up money for you. That's their problem.
Yeah, someone who's going to run.
So that's something that I've had that people kind of took off, but usually once I got assigned to the case, it was something that people were in custody or people came back to court.
Sure.
So this is, Joe kind of gave the introduction, but the goal of this podcast is to be a Milwaukee podcast. We want to interview people who are Milwaukeeans or maybe passing through Milwaukee and kind of get a sense of the community. And you're a native. You've known a lot of people in the community. You still know people in the community. You've served the community. I'm curious, Judge, what's your favorite thing about Milwaukee?
Restaurants and bars.
Yes, we have a great restaurant and bar scene.
We do.
The restaurants are awesome. I remember growing up, and there were not very many good restaurants in Milwaukee. I mean, they weren't bad, but
It's not like today.
Oh God, no. I mean, if you went out to dinner in a fancy restaurant, there were about 5 or 6 total. If you went out, it was a big deal. And within the last probably 30 years, and even more so within the last 15 years, things have really exploded. And the best kept secret, it's not even a secret because everyone goes there, is the Swinging Door.
Yes.
Heck yeah.
Yes.
They got the best food around, great bartenders. It's like going to Cheers.
So for those who don't know, our studio is literally down the block from there, and it's a Tuesday night line out the door.
Oh, absolutely.
The atmosphere is phenomenal. If you can see the background right behind us, that's actually a picture of the Swinging Doors. So we're in there now.
We're pretending to be in the Swinging Door.
Yeah, we're pretending.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was really the impetus of the show. It was really organic. Andy and I were out to dinner with our families and some friends, and we ended up at the Swinging Door because it's a great place after dinner. And we met, what was it, like a group of people, and one guy was like a pediatric surgeon out of the state, and we're just running into these amazing people, and we're like, this is a podcast. Like, we should be dragging these people into our studio and just meeting them and seeing, what are you doing here? Why are you at the Swinging Door? And that was the impetus for that, and that's how I met you, kind of told you about it. So
I mean, the Swinging Door has basically two types of people. They have regulars, people who come in on a regular basis. There's a few that just pop in from time to time who live in the area. And then about 50% are people who are staying at the hotels in the area. And I will tell you, I mean, I've run into people who come to Milwaukee on business, maybe once a month or once every 2 months, and the first thing they do when they get in town is they go to the swinging door.
Really? Yeah, I could see that.
What a great plug. Yeah, we're hoping that the show gets big enough that people start going there just trying to run into Andy and I, because our plan is to just pop in at random times and just
pull people up.
Yeah, grab the bartender and be like, hey, who do you think's interesting here? And grab them and then see if they're willing to follow us into this building next door. And that's going to be the hurdle, is being like, hey, follow us through these doors, through this hallway.
Yeah, the bartenders are great. There's a handful of bartenders who are there pretty regularly, and so they know what's what, and they know who's reputable and who isn't, and it's
we'll want both probably.
Yeah,
it's funny because Daryl is one of my buddies, and he's there on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and there was one night I walked in the door and I sat at the on a bar stool right by the door, and he's like, Jeff, I got a seat for you on the other end of the bar. And I'm like, okay, you insist. I don't know why. So I walked down there, and he was, after I sat down, he says, say you're welcome. And I go, or say thank you. And I said, thank you. And for what? And he said, I just saved you from that nut job at the end.
I thought he was going to say, and then all of a sudden, like, a beautiful woman walked up and sat down there.
No.
Honestly, that's the same.
It wasn't that. It was like, the person you were sitting next to is nuts.
So we need that guy on our show.
Yes, we got to find him.
Daryl's a riot.
We're gonna interview him. I talked to him a couple times now about this, and he's super excited about getting involved.
And Daryl can tell all kinds of stories.
Oh yeah,
because he's been around town for a long time. He works at the Wisconsin Club, also as the bar manager there. So he knows a bunch of people, and he's got a really
he's the man.
And he's got a great, very dry sense of humor. So
yes,
I'm sure.
And what I love about Milwaukee is it's such a small, big city. It's like literally one of the last small big cities. It's a big city that I live just north of here. I can get downtown in 10 minutes. There's no traffic. Anyone who complains about traffic, it's not bad. You go to any other major city, but it still feels like a big city. It's got the great restaurants. We have a bunch of James Beard award-winning restaurants. We were just on the Chef show, Top Chef. Yes. I mean, it's kind of in the heyday right now before it gets too big, and then everyone's like, damn it.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool things going on in the city for sure.
Yes, there is.
Well, and having grown up here, it's not unusual for me to walk into some place and see somebody I know from somewhere.
Sure.
Yes. No, I like that about the city.
Running into people, that I haven't seen in 20 years from high school or from college, who I, may run into at a bar or stuff like that. So it's kind of nice. I mean, we call it small walkie for a
absolutely.
reason. So
did you ever run into anybody you tried that wasn't so wonderful to run into?
Yeah, I've had a couple. I was in a Target one day, and I was walking through the aisle, and this woman comes up to me, and she's got 4 kids, and they kind of surround me, and she's like, you were my son's judge.
Oh, no.
Oh, God.
I'm like,
not so tough without the robe now.
And I looked at her and I said, well, how did that work out for you? And she said, actually, great. He's doing real well now. We want to thank you. And I'm going,
wow.
Great, got to go.
Yeah. That's actually really cool.
That is cool.
Before they change their mind.
Yeah, right.
But no, I've had people, stop me on the street saying, I don't know if you remember me, but, you helped me through this or you helped me through that. Once in a while you'll have people kind of stare you down, and I'm like, that guy looks familiar. But never really had any real major issues. But it is, people do come up to you, especially if it's been a good experience or a quasi-good experience.
Yeah.
No one wants to go to jail, but...
Sure.
You
could say to them, real quick is if someone's got a bad experience, you can say, guess what? If I was meaner, you'd still be in there and I wouldn't be seeing you right now.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, so it's, it hasn't been too terrible that way.
That's good.
Just handful of threats, just stupid threats, where you get these letters that don't even make sense. And so I send them over to the sheriff's department, and they're like, what do you want me to do with this? I go, just so you're aware.
I've gotten some just from being a podcast host. I don't even try people.
You get threats?
Yeah, I've gotten a couple of them. Not serious ones, just people that don't like me for no reason.
Well, and that brings me to the other interesting story. I was sentencing a guy on a homicide, and it was a really bad case, and we had the trial, and he did not play well with others, so he was very difficult through the trial. And the sentencing was on a day that I had another case coming in, and there were a bunch of TV cameras in there. And they weren't there for this case, but they were still rolling anyways, because they're like, okay, well, we have to be here, so we're rolling anyways. And so the guy says to me, Judge, I want a new judge because I don't think you can be fair. And I said, sir, I just call him as I see him. And he said, you can call me anything you want, but don't call me late for dinner. And I looked at him and I said, okay, then I'll call you a piece of garbage. And then I looked up and the TV cameras were on. There was a reason, because the woman that he killed, he put in a garbage bag and threw her in the dumpster. So there was this garbage theme that went along with it. But obviously people did not have the same sense of humor that I did, at which point I realized, uh-oh. And so I apologized and went up on appeal, and I got upheld because I apologized.
Oh, that's great. Wow.
But, sometimes things just come out.
I feel like calling a dude a piece of garbage that murdered somebody, put him in a garbage bag, should probably just be ignored.
Yeah.
But that's me.
Probably. I don't know that there's a whole lot of difference between piece of garbage and menace to society.
Yeah.
Sure. Yep. And one of the things that I think people don't really appreciate about being a judge is that you are very frequently on the record. What you're saying is being recorded in some fashion, especially now with, remote hearings and being broadcasted. And it's tough. People aren't used to having everything they say recorded, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It's, there's a lot of stuff that gets recorded, and for better or for worse,
right.
Who knows?
Right.
So.
Well, it's just an interesting dynamic, right? That, you're no one's always on their game, and people say things that, sometimes.
Well, and, after a while we get frustrated, and especially, trying to try a homicide case that should take 2.5 to 3 days, which took a week because every 5 minutes we'd have to stop and remove the defendant from the courtroom because he was yelling and screaming. After a while that kind of gets to you, but, I always thought that sarcasm was probably the best way to go.
Oh, I would be so screwed if I was a judge. I have like the Italian rage and sarcasm. I would just be, I would have to be like a New York judge.
Yeah.
Right.
I would just say wild crap all the time and not care.
Well, I had a, when I was first in misdemeanor court, I had a defendant who came in and he tested positive for marijuana, and he's like, I swear I never smoked. I was in a car and these guys were smoking around me. And I said, so let me get this straight. You were in a car, and the car was hermetically sealed, and there was a guy in the car with a big old Cheech and Chong joint, and when they opened the door to get you out of there, all of this smoke billowed out. And he's like, no. And I go, well, then how could you have, tested positive from a contact?
You're like, the correct answer to that question was yes.
No, it was all there. And I was next to the guy. And I looked at him, and this was like in the height of Judge Judy days. And I said, does it look like I have stupid written across my Yeah, I kind of like misdemeanor court because it was the court of drunken criminal stupidity, and we could laugh at the end of the day about any number of different cases of just drunk stupid things.
Sure.
When you get to more serious felonies and homicide, sexual assault, it's kind of hard to laugh at a lot of that.
Yeah. I mean, I was an EMS and I was a firefighter, so I know the dark humor is a thing, but you can't do that publicly.
No, you try not to.
Yeah, it's more of like a self-soothe type of thing for people who are in that space. So I can imagine that's what it's got to be like. Again, my brother-in-law does it. Just being around that all the time. How do you maintain not hatred for humanity after seeing and dealing with a lot of the things you deal with?
Well, after a while it gets to you. So, I spent 6 years doing nothing but homicides and sexual assault cases. And first couple of years that I did it in 3 2-year stints. So we take a break and then come back.
Is that by design to rotate out and go back in?
And so in Milwaukee, the judges are assigned to a different division for 3 to 4 years and then rotate into a different division. And in the felony division, homicide, sexual assault court was supposed to only be a 1-year assignment, and then it turned out to be a 2-year assignment, and then certain people are stuck there forever. But I used to do 2 years, and then I'd have enough and then come back. So the first time I did it it was interesting because, I'm in my early 40s and been on the bench 5-6 years, and oh wow, I'm doing all these high profile cases, and that was all fun for a while. And then the second round, things started getting a little worse, and by the time I did my last stint, things were really bad, and I couldn't wait to get out. And at the end of the day, I was ready to kill somebody. So
yeah, I can imagine.
That would be really hard. But it's pretty impressive hearing you talk. You can hear that you love the city and you have a lot of pride in the city.
Oh, absolutely.
And seeing the worst parts of the people and the worst parts of the city and still feeling that way is impressive.
Yeah, and there are a lot of good people here. And, I always said that, we have 2 types of people that come before us in criminal court, and that is, good people who do bad things and truly evil people. And the truly evil people are, maybe 15 to 20% of the people that we see. So a lot of people get put into positions that, they put themselves there, so it's not an excuse, but they get put in a position because of other things that are going on in their lives. They don't know how to handle it, and that gets to be where it goes. So you have people, in many instances, certain people who are redeemable.
Yeah,
but there are some that are not. There's a good percentage, 15-20% of people that probably should never ever see the light of day again.
So no pun intended, but do you feel you're a pretty good judge of character when you meet somebody for the first time?
Yeah, I think so. Over all these years, I've been BS'd right and left all the way, so I know when somebody's kind of being upfront and not being upfront. I just took a criminal case not too long ago. And I won't get into any of the details, but I was talking to the guy's therapist, and I'm like, so what do you think? And she's like, yeah, I think he's telling the truth, and I just don't think that he is, somebody who is overly sophisticated in whatever went on. And I said, yep, that's what I thought also, is just double checking. But, I can still kind of tell by talking to somebody if they're trying to BS me.
And somehow you still hired me, though, Judge.
I was gonna say something in favor. You'd be like, and Andy, that's a raving testament to your character.
Well, and I think Andy had a sense of humor at the time, so that kind of covered up for everything else.
That's why, when we originally came up with the show, I what did I tell you? I said you are one of the few people I've met that's just an amazing person to have a conversation with.
Oh, absolutely.
Legitimately. And you have a fantastic radio voice. That doesn't hurt either.
Yeah. and you know, I mean, I think Andy learned this from being a law clerk, and that is he just calls them as he sees them. So he represents a client, and he does everything he needs to do to represent a client, but he's not going to go out there and risk his license to do that. So he's very upfront, and I mean, that's my take on it. And you owe me a drink now.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, let's
Speaking of that, I have one more very important question
Yes.
for you. Judge, do you think Swinging Door is serving Tullamore Dew right now?
Yes.
Should we go get one?
We're going to go get one. One thing we do want to do is shout out to our drink sponsor for this episode, Central Standard Craft Distillery. We've been drinking their brandy old fashioned in a can, and this is legit, and not because
it's actually not bad.
It doesn't give you that sugar sting. You know when you have a drink like the mixed drinks where it's like it's too much in your throat.
Yep.
This one's smooth.
It is.
It's very
Very
so.
good.
This is fantastic. So it's a partnership with Leinenkugel. So Central Standard Craft Distillery, brandy old fashioned in a can, fantastic. So, Judge, thank you very much for being our first guest and doing this with us. It's a lot of fun, and let's go get a whiskey or something. What do you?
Let's do it.
That's what we're gonna
Absolutely.
do.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Judge.
Appreciate it. All right.
That was great.